Hey y'all, welcome to today's show. We're going to continue with our series of culinary herbs and garden plants that you may already be growing that have medicinal properties of which you may not know. And of course, this all comes from my book, Growing Your Survival Herb Garden for Preppers, Permaculture People, Homesteaders, and everyone else. But today we're going to start with dill. And dill is actually a very interesting herb. It's one that's mentioned in the Bible, like several of these. So we mentioned Jesus said, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You pay a tenth of mint, dill, and cumin, yet you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. These things should have been done without neglecting the others." So obviously, dill was considered very valuable. Uh, so, I guess with that admonition in mind, we probably ought to look at why dill was so valuable. Because presumably it was good for more than just flavoring pickles. But an interesting aside, these days we associate dill with dill pickles. And there's actually a reason for that. Both come from the same area of the world. The cucumber originated in the Mediterranean, and the first dill pickles were probably made by either the ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, or Sumerians. And our tradition of dill pickles comes through the ancient Jews. They, after the fall of Israel, when they were dispersed, they took with them cucumbers and dill and garlic, and it was food and medicine. And when we think of just the regular old dill pickle we have beside a hamburger, that pickle is actually so full of historical significance. It's one of the oldest foods known to man that was essential for survival and is actually quite medicinal. Dill has been used for countless centuries as a preservative for food. It has antimicrobial properties. In the Scandinavian, Norse regions, they use dill in preserving fish. Just dill and salt, maybe some juniper berries, a little bit of vodka or aquavit makes the wonderful gravlax, the preserved salmon. Uh, Again, you'll find this in smoked salmon, preserved salmon with dill, very much in Jewish culture. If you go to a Jewish deli, you get bagels and lox, and it's fantastic actually. You get the bagel with the cream cheese and maybe a sprig of dill. If it's a little fancy, you get your smoked salmon, maybe a few capers. If you go to I'm just going to say Scandinavian. I cannot remember exactly which of those Nordic countries this comes from, but it's the smorgasbord. I guess it's Swedish. I'm going to go Swedish. Well, anyway, they kind of mastered the art of the sandwich, and it's just this huge spread of small sandwiches, and among them, you're going to find the cured salmon, the gravlax, and a lot of dill. And cheeses, goes very well with cheeses. It was a preservative for cheese as well as meat and fish and cucumbers and just about everything else. But it really has a lot of medicinal properties. It's essentially a digestive herb. It may even be the essential digestive herb. For thousands of years, people have taken dill, well, one, to mix with food to prevent food poisoning, but two, for gas, flatulence, upset stomach, and all that. It's especially good for easing cramping and gas in babies and children. You infuse dill in hot milk. That's the way it's traditionally been used. Other herbs can be used the same way, like caraway and such as that. Fennel, definitely fennel seed. But dill is really the go-to, the one that's been used a lot for colic issues and just gas and flatulence. I mean, that causes babies and kids to cry a lot. They're not used to it, and it really helps. It settles the stomach. Dill actually increases mother's milk. It's what we call galactagogue. It calms intestinal spasms. It even helps with menstrual cramps and is useful in colds and flu and helps with bad breath. Dill has amazing properties that we really don't think about these days. We just throw it in our pickle brine, but really good stuff. It's a weedy herb. It's in the Apiaceae family. It's umbelliferous, so it gets that like pom-pom type head of seeds. It's pretty. It'll look good in any ornamental garden or in your herb or vegetable garden. It has thin, kind of fern-like leaves. Kind of just some people say they're feathery. I just say it's a soft texture. The flowers are yellow, and like I said, they form in umbels. Dill is an annual that will self-seed rampantly if established. If you plant dill, you'll probably only have to plant it once. Usually, dill is um, it's a self-seeder. We'll just go with that. Dill likes loose soil that's moderately rich, but it will grow in poor, disturbed soil where weeds thrive if it has to. It's a very hardy plant. Seeds can be broadcast. Some people call that throw sowing or different words. When I was a kid, it was called broadcasting, and it's how you take small seeds and you can either toss them out, as you walk through tilled garden beds, or there was actually a little, oh, I don't even know what you would call it. I think it was called a broadcaster. It was sort of like a bucket with a wheel on the bottom that you turn with the crank, and you've seen people probably use these spreading grass seed. You walked along, it had a harness that went over your shoulder, and you turned it, and it would just throw the seed everywhere as you walked. So it really doesn't need to be planted deeply at all. In fact, it should only be sown about a quarter inch deep at most. Ideally, the plants should be about a foot apart. So either in the fall or the spring. Um, it likes full sun, and it can grow 2 to 3 feet tall. So um, it can be a nice kind of striking plant. It actually is very attractive and definitely one that I would consider absolutely essential to have on hand. And the thing that's interesting to me, I'm having trouble these days. Like, if I don't have everything I need on hand and I go to the store to get the spices to make my pickling spices, I prefer to use dill seed. The spice companies don't seem to be selling dill seed anymore like they used to. They just sell dill weed, which is the tops. So if you want dill seed, you're probably going to have to grow it yourself. At least that's been my experience in my area. Fenugreek is a culinary herb or spice that's really not used much in Western cooking, but it should be. It's a medicinal herb. It has a bit of a it's odd, okay? I've grown fenugreek before. I've worked with fenugreek. It's used a lot in the cuisines of Africa and the Middle East as a spice. For the ancient Greeks and Romans, it was a medicinal herb. The seed, it has almost sort of a maple syrup-like flavor, but on the other hand, it's not really sweet. It's kind of strange to describe, but with combined with other spices, it's really good, like in savory dishes. It's especially used in curries and such in India. It has a little bitterness to it. It's very very hard to describe, but it's more practically. I mean, if you're a prepper and such, it's actually one of the easiest seeds to sprout. So you could put this in a jar, put a little cloth over the top, put a little water in there, and you're going to have a quart jar full of fenugreek sprouts that you can eat as an emergency food in a matter of like 48 hours. I mean, they're ready to go. Um, Sit them in the sun, let them green up, and you got tons of nutrition in there. Or add them to salads, or just eat them throughout the winter. I mean, it could be really be one of those survival foods that you could have in the winter and early spring when most things really aren't growing. Because that's the benefit of sprouts. They're not they're nothing to jump up and down about, culinarily speaking, taste wise. But they're an easy way, whether it's bean sprouts or grain sprouts or like fenugreek seed sprouts, chia sprouts, lots of sprouts. Easy way to get some very fast nutrition and fiber when you might need it in times when things just won't grow outside. And it's something you could do, like even if there was no electricity and you couldn't use grow lights, and such as that. Very, very easy to make alfalfa sprouts, fenugreek sprouts, mung bean sprouts, lentil sprouts. Lentils are a really good one. I like lentil sprouts quite a bit. But the medicinal properties of fenugreek are really impressive. According to Plants for a Future, fenugreek is much used in herbal medicine especially in North Africa, the Middle East, and India. It has a wide range of medicinal applications. The seeds are very nourishing and are given to convalescents to encourage weight gain, especially in anorexia nervosa. The seeds should not be prescribed medicinally for pregnant women since they can induce uterine contractions. Research has shown that the seeds can inhibit cancer of the liver, lower blood cholesterol levels, and have an antibiotic effect, and have an anti-diabetic effect. The seeds and leaves are this is so hard for me to pronounce. They lower cholesterol. That's cholesterolemic. Anti-cholesterolemic. They lower cholesterol. Let's just go with that. Anti-inflammatory, anti-tumor. Carminative, demulcent, that means softening. Deobstruent means getting rid of basically obstructions in the bowel, essentially. Emollient, which means softening. Expectorant gets rid of mucus in the lungs. Febrifuge helps with fever. Galactagogue also increases mother's milk, just like Dill does. Hypoglycemic, which means lowers blood sugar. Laxative, parasiticide. It helps get rid of parasites. They really ought to make these things easier to pronounce. And restorative, anti-uterine tonic. Seeds yield a strong mucilage, and they are therefore useful in the treatment of inflammations and ulcers of the stomach and intestines. Taken internally, a decoction of the ground seed serves to drain off the sweat ducts. The seed is very nourishing and body-building and is one of the most efficacious tonics in case of physical debility caused by anemia or infectious disease, especially where a nervous factor is involved. It is also used in the treatment of late-onset diabetes, poor digestion, insufficient lactation, painful menstruation, labor pains, etc. The seeds freshen bad breath and restore a dulled sense of taste. Externally, the seeds can be ground into a powder and used as a poultice for abscesses, boils, ulcers, burns, etc. They can be used as a douche for excessive vaginal discharge. The leaves are harvested in the growing season and can be used fresh or dried. The seeds are harvested when fully ripe and dried for later use. Compounds extracted from the plant have shown cardiotonic, hypoglycemic, diuretic, antiphlogistic, hypotensive activities. And the seeds also have saponins, which have been used in various pharmaceutical applications. But that's an amazing amount of qualities or uses for one simple little plant. Super easy to grow. You can see why I consider fenugreek almost to be not just a medicine, but a survival food. I mean, I would really think that fenugreek would be in a survival garden, really in the top 10. It's actually in the bean family. It's a leguminous plant. That's why it sprouts so easy. That's why it's so easy to use. Those little seeds are actually little beans, believe it or not. So you grow them just as you would any other legume. It likes full sun. Water needs are moderate. Fenugreek will grow up to 2 feet tall. Spacing should be about 1.5 feet apart. So after the last frost, the foliage is shiny and blue-green, and the flowers are not showy. So, really, if you're planning, if you're prepping, I guess I should say, make a note of fenugreek. Probably the two, well, for me, probably the two most important legumes I would plant would be fenugreek and lentil. And it's because, well, you've seen how useful fenugreek is. Lentils are just an excellent protein-rich, easy to use, member of the bean and pea family. But the thing is, they don't need pre-soaking. You can harvest tons of lentils. You can store them up. You can actually grind them and use them in breads. You can use them as a grain, or you can just throw them in boiling water with some onion and maybe some chicken broth or a bone or something, and you've got excellent, nutritious soup. And if fuel it was